your mammy has a few hours, and everything was tried. And Tom, it was a Friday, and Tom went on to the Saturday morning, and Tom was off, and he just happened to come in, and I'll never forget. He came in the ward, and he didn't do a terrible lot. He just looked and he listened to the doctor, and then he touched Jackie, and he says, "Have you tried such and such?" And that was tried, and Jack just come back, and we got 11 weeks that we wouldn't have had, and there were 11 super weeks that myself and my children had with Jackie, and I can never thank him enough.
He would have been here in his lunch break doing a round to see the patients. He would have called in the evening, and at times at 11 or 12 at night he would have had the lights on outside in the grounds and would have been out cutting the grass himself.
So we owe Dr. Tom McGinleys the most enormous debt of gratitude as a community.
The hospice is a very special place. For starters, it doesn't even seem like a hospital, it's like a home. And you come in here and the ambience and the aura of goodness.
And I think it was me sitting in that private room with my friend who died very dignified in that hospice. That was sort of, I said, when I left that day when he died, I said, what can I do for this establishment? And I think then that man McGinley had me captured.
The Foyle Hospice is well known to many people in the Northwest, as most of us have known someone who has contracted cancer and has come here for care. My own family used the hospice 11 years ago when my brother Stephen, aged 40, spent his last few weeks here. The hospice recently marked 25 years since they first began caring for people. I've returned to revisit the work that they do and to find out how Dr. Tom McGinley made it all happen.
Well, I knew Tom as one of the GPs in one of the leading practices in the city, but I wasn't aware of his interest in end-of-life care until I myself was out one day with a student, and we were visiting a patient who was at the end of life. And when we came away, I said, what we need in this town is a hospice. Then I went and spoke to another doctor at the hospital, Ailby Byrne, who subsequently is one of our trustees. And I said, you know, Ailby, what about a hospice? And he said, you're too late. McGinley started running. I went over and I met him, got to know him a bit better, and realized that I could either let him get on with it or I could offer to come and work with him. And he's been a friend ever since. Tom ate and slept hospice all those years. He was so focused on it. We were actually invited to lunch with the Western Health Board at that time. And of course there's no such thing as a free lunch, but we were looking for money and to ask them, you know, to help. They more or less condescendingly patted us on the heads and said, look, sorry, we've no money, which of course every health board has said ever since anyway, but we don't think you can do it. It's a big project, and you know, it's too big. So, you know, go away and think again. Now, I might have done that, gone away and thought Tom was, well, as I've said, it was like a red rag to a McGinley bull. And I won't tell you the language he used outside, but it was more to the point, you know, wait and see. We are going to do, you know, we're going to do this.
We were both working as district nurses in the Derry area. We were both working in the same practice. Whenever there was an ad put in the local papers for a home care nursing sister for Foyle Hospice, I didn't apply for it at the time. I thought about it and felt that I wouldn't be capable of taking on this role. And then one of Dr. McGinley's health visitors phoned me and said that she had talked to him about who would be capable of taking on this role, and that my name came up. Because I was working with Rosemary, I met her on the way, told her where it was going, and she said, I thought the same. I saw the ad and I thought about applying for it. You find out about it and come back and let me know. So I went, talked to Dr. McGinley about it, and he gave me more information what the post was going to entail. And I told him I had already spoken to someone else that might be interested in the job as well. So two of us went to Dr. McGinley then, and it all moved on from there.
The rest, as I say, is history. and there wasn't much known in the area at the time about what hospice care actually meant. I mean, we were talking about a time when there was no inpatient unit, no building. So we had to go away first of all and learn ins and outs of how to care for people.
And then we came back to Crawford Square, which was a big empty building. No curtains on the walls, no paint, nothing.
No desks,
no paper, absolutely nothing. So from there we started designing referral forms.
We actually went and bought books because we realised that we'd have to keep records. We didn't know what records we were going to keep, but we went and bought some stationery, and that's how our filing system and record keeping was started.
Then we needed patients. So that started off by Dr. McGinley inviting GPs in the area up to the office in Crawford Square. And we were just amazed the turnout there was.
So those early patients, we're indebted to them.
Yeah, well, I always say I learned more. Berna was the name of the first person that I visited, and I always say I learned more from her than I did on any course or any books I ever read.
Way before I ever got involved in hospice care, and Tom McGinley was anaesthetist in Altnagavin, I was a ward sister in orthopaedics, and I clearly remember him coming to see a patient in orthopaedics. His idea of how to treat her pain was completely foreign to absolutely everybody, and the drug having to be ordered maybe from England, and this was a whole new phenomenon, which probably afterwards then I didn't think about a lot. But so that was way before it was ever muted that he was palliative care was going to come locally. We knew what it was like to see people in pain, but for the first time ever, we were able to give them something to take that pain away. They didn't have to suffer pain. That, for us, that was really a new concept.
In those days, this was a sort of attitude. There was no whole science and art of palliative care, hadn't really been developed to a high degree. So there was a lot of work to be done. And Tom himself was inspired by one patient, and that's Michael Donaghy. He was at a loss when Michael asked that $64,000 question. Am I going to die? Am I going to live? And he lied. And that really inspired him to go and say, look, there's an awful lot we can do for these people, and therefore I want to do it.
Dr. McGinley was born in America in the mid-30s, but his family returned back to Gweedore in County Donegal, and it was there that Dr. McGinley was steeped in a strong sense of community and the importance of caring for each other. We joined him for a day in Gweedore to talk to him about his early days.
There was no work available, so there wasn't any choice really. My father had to come back, and we were then reared in our grandfather's house here in Derrybeg. My father went to Scotland like most of the other men around here, and so that was one of the sad parts of my life really, that I never got to know him. He would come home fortnight in the Glasgow Fair in July, and you didn't see him then until the following July. Some years he didn't come home at all in July. So the grandfather in whose house we were reared, he became the father figure. And obviously my mother became very much the dominant person in our lives. Went to school initially in Derrybeg, and then after a while
My brother and I went into Gold Island, and we spent a year or more in there. My aunt's husband, Danny McBride, he taught there. But I think it was a very wise move on my mother's part to send us in there, because we practically had private tuition, and it certainly helped us to get the scholarships that we needed it. Otherwise, if we didn't get a scholarship, we would just probably have had to join our father in Glasgow. So luckily enough, I got a scholarship, and I landed at university. I had no idea what I was going to do, none in the wide world. And I remember going up to register, and the girl behind the desk asked, well, what do you want to do? And I says, I don't know. So I said to the girl, I says, just give me the longest course. And she says, well, medicine at that time was 6 years. So I says, that's grand. And university then, I probably was 4 or 5 years into studying medicine that I realized, well, I'm going to be a doctor. So that's basically how, I have never ever regretted it. I've never regretted it. Even though I had played a lot of football, like Gaelic football, I had never actually been at home to one county championship medal with my club here in Gweedore. So I decided I will move up near Gweedore, and we did, by the way, won a championship, not necessarily through my efforts. So Altnagalvin had just opened, and then I met my wife Deirdre, and of course that really then decided my future. And as I looking across here today as well is Benvarden Avenue, and before my father and mother went to America, my mother went into premature labour, and my brother was born over there in Benvarden Avenue. So when I came to Derry first, I came to work in Altnagalvin. So all of this really has, I met my wife here, so all my children were born in Derry, so that's a lot of meaning for me. It was Michael Donaghy. He was his final year at St. Collins, and something that I really think, when I think back on it, I mean, how poorly we were able to control his pain, but at that time we didn't know any better. And it was around about that time that Dame Cecily Saunders had started the hospice in St. Christopher's in London. So I decided I would start just getting a wee bit more knowledge about pain relief and things like that. So I started going to St. Joseph's in Hackney, and Dame Cecily Saunders had spent time in St. Joseph's in Hackney, so she used to call there. She gave me an awful lot of encouragement, but at the time I was just an ordinary GP, and I realised that I would have to get a specialist degree before I could really venture into setting up a hospice. So I started doing anaesthetics on a part-time basis while still continuing to work full-time in general practice. And that took quite a while, because to get my fellowship, I had to do a primary exam, which was tough enough, and then the final part. So as I say, that took quite a number of years, because I couldn't take full time out of general practice. And then once I got that, I mean, that was it. That was 1978. So from then on, I knew I was going to build a hospice. But I think possibly the most important thing that made the decision for me was what my mother used to say when we were growing up. And she used to look after people after they had died, got them prepared. There were no undertakers or anything like that at the time. And she always used to say, "Thema dilig Harris, we are all on a journey." It was the spontaneous response of the people of the Northwest that made it possible. The money never entered my mind because I knew the people of Derry and Donegal, and I knew they would support us.
We looked at sites on the water side, on the Derry side. We had people saying in this city, you know, if it's built on the Derry side, I'll never go near it. If it's built on the water side, forget it, we're not going to support it. And I think, if I recollect, Tom said, we'll build the damn thing on the middle of the bridge and that'll satisfy everybody. Eventually he found this other side. He looked at it, he went up, he stood and looked at this and said, this is where it should be built. The complication was, for him at the time, was this field was owned by the Orange Order. He said, "Keith, how can I go to the Orange Order? You know, my first language is Irish, I come from West Donegal, you know, I'm a Roman Catholic. How can I go to the Orange Order and ask to buy their field?" And, you know, negotiations went on. You know, we wanted a little bit, and then we wanted that bit, then we wanted the whole field. Eventually then it was bought. You know, we always had the joke that Tom had joined the Orange Order. We planned and thought, where are we going to have it? Well, we opened it in the hall, out in the car park, and we actually planned for having it outside. All right, it was June. What happens? Monday it rained, Tuesday it rained, Wednesday it rained. Thursday, the opening day, the sun split split everything. It was just wonderful. That wonderful, beautiful day. And on Friday, it rained. We had wrestled with the idea of who would open the hospice. Do you invite a politician? No. Do you invite a church person? If so, what brand? No. Who do you invite? A film star? Not really appropriate. So in the end, it was decided we would invite a young person of a patient who died in the hospice, one a Catholic and one a Protestant. So these two young girls were invited with their fathers, and they were the two who cut the ribbon on that day. It was a very emotive day.
In June 1991, two young girls who had lost their mothers and the home care had looked after them, they officially opened the hospice on a glorious, glorious day. And it was described by local papers as being one of the most eventful things that had happened. All our dreams came true at that stage. It was difficult because Deirdre had also been the pharmacist to the hospice. She developed breast cancer, and she had surgery and then chemotherapy. She had an unusual reaction to chemotherapy. She developed sort of an encephalitis, and her hearing was badly affected, but she continued on in her work as a pharmacist. Then a few months before she died, it was obviously that further chemo or any further treatment was not going to work, and so I took time off and stayed in the house. She required very, very little care, to be honest with you. She was very, very brave. On the night before she died, she told me that she felt that the end was very close, and she thanked me for looking after her. And she just early the next morning, she just died. And I remember well, the following Sunday week was Father's Day, and she had already written her Father's Day card and all, knowing that she wasn't going to be there. Our main target is to, first and foremost, to control pain and other symptoms. Pain is not just the only symptom. And then to communicate with people. And that just doesn't come overnight, Chris. You have to, you know, need some experience. I think it needs a special type of person to be able to sit down and communicate. And they're all excellent at it, as you know.
I suppose, I think within this type of setting, you have like a black humour. I mean, even at our report times, there's always somebody coming up with a quirky comment. Maybe that's our way of dealing with some stuff. There's other days when things are sad and you need somebody to be able to say that to. If they have pain and they're suffering, then nothing means anything, only the pain. But if you can take that away, then they can be part of normal things. I don't know if that makes sense, really. And celebrate anniversaries and birthdays. And really, in a way, I suppose they're making memories for people to look back on too. Palliative care is very special, and I know it might be a cliche, but a privilege, really.
All right, yeah. So this is why you're still into dressing.
Foyle Hospice costs over £2 million a year to run, and a major part of that is raised by thousands of people who give up their own time to raise money.
The Women of Hope are a band of ladies who came together through Sandra Biddle. We all have had breast cancer and we have survived it, so we consider ourselves as survivors. What we did, we contacted all famous dairy men and women worldwide, and I must say the response was amazing. We wanted them to give us their favourite prayer and their reason why it was their favourite prayer, and that's what made it so different.
This run with my daughter Amy today because the hospice is a great cause, and there's loads of people out there who have been affected and have needed hospice care, and I'm just delighted to be able to take part today.
I just had it for my sister 13 years ago and died of cancer, and then she lost her husband when he was 47, and that's all to say. Just walk with her.
You know what, it's been a brilliant day, it's been a great atmosphere, and the rain didn't deter anybody. As you can see, the crowds have just turned out, so it's really good. Well, you know, my daddy died of cancer a long time ago, but he never availed of the hospice. It wasn't there at that time, and I think it just means a lot to be fundraising and supporting the hospice, because it's such a special place, you know, and it's really needed in Derry, you know, and we just do it every year and try to raise money for it, you know.
Kieran McGinley is head of fundraising, and I asked him how he manages to keep it all going.
The fundraising has grown with the hospice from its inception all those years ago, and the community have really taken the hospice to its heart, and every pound that's raised is spent here locally in the community. So we're extending well out beyond the boundaries of just the city itself. We go into Limavady, Strabane, Castlederg, and in all those places too we are highly developed now in having charity shops as well. It keeps the need for the fundraising fresh in people's minds, so that people know that, you know, at the end of the day, every single penny that they give us will be used to help people with cancer and other life-limiting illnesses. Each year it costs around 2.4 million for us to provide our service here, and of that we only get possibly 20% from the local government. Therefore, we have to raise 80% of our money each year. So it's up to us in the fundraising department to put together a year-long calendar of events. You're looking at trying to raise over £1.5 million every year.
Good morning, Foyle Hospice.
About 23 years ago, I was probably only about 6 at the time, I was involved with the Junior Chamber of Commerce, and I think the very first event that we ever done was a go-karting event where everybody had to make up their own little go-kart, and we raced it round the Guildhall. That was the very first money I ever raised for the hospice. My face is not the best looking probably in the world, but I'd done a boxing event, and it was whenever Noel came along and says, "Martin, would you get involved with this?" And I have to say, I have to congratulate Martin Dunn on putting up a good fight. But I can front these events, right? But the people here in the city are so special. But once again, the minute you mentioned the hospice, they were there in their droves. And it was a packed house, got great entertainment, and as you can see, I'm still looking very similar, but it's the wee events like that that makes the difference as well.
One of the biggest events ever held in this city was the 10,000 Santas, which is in the Guinness Book of Records. Tell me about that.
Well, we're very proud of that event, and it was great because not only did it raise a lot of money and a lot of profile for the hospice and 3 of the other charities that were involved, but it also raised a lot of publicity for the town. I mean, Kenny Dalglish says to me one day, he says, "You'll never beat us," because, you know, he said, "We've got a population here of 1.2 million and you've only got 120,000 people." And the people in this city came out in droves and from throughout the world, and it was great to hold that world record and have 12,995 people.
For 150 years, but in 1973 it disappeared. Well, it's been a privilege for them to tell me that I've raised over £153,000 for the hospice. That's the figure of the cheque that we give them, and I did a lot of different events to try and raise that money for them. I believed that the hospice was doing fantastic work in the city, and I wanted to know how I could do something unique and different. So I set up an event called the People of the Year Awards, and that was to recognise do-gooders of the city. There are many people who do a lot of good in the city, but they haven't been recognised for it, and I believed that I would do this using the charitable side, that all of the funds raised by that would go to the Foyle Hospice. And 1 in 3 families, of course, maybe more than that now, in this city are actually treated by the Foyle Hospice care, Foyle Hospice nurses. You have to experience what the Foyle Hospice offer before you can actually understand what I mean. My first experience with the Foyle Hospice was just after it opened. When I went down there, I had a friend who was very ill with cancer. He didn't want anyone to know that he was ill. I had a very difficult decision to make. I approached Dr. McGinley, I explained the circumstances. He very carefully actually sent his hospice team out to visit my gentleman friend. He was cared for by the best care that you could have imagined.
That way without us even realising, I think, Bishop Daly.
I was just thinking the other night of the numbers of people that are...
You're a very small team at the start, and it's been a privilege to be here and seeing the team grow. From a very small staff, we had the 2 home care sisters and maybe 3 or 4 office people, and now at this stage we have 7 people in the office. We have a fundraising team, we have all the nursing staff, we have our daycare team, our home care team, and also we have a huge team of volunteers. And I suppose I'm in a great position, having been from the very start. I've got to know so many of these people and seen the team grow and see how all the services have developed.
Yeah, we're very fortunate to have the magnificent input from the volunteers that we have, and I would have to say that the hospice probably wouldn't be able to continue to do the great work that it does without the support of the volunteers that we have, and those are volunteers spread right across the whole of the organisation. This year has been an important year as well because we've celebrated 25 years of hospice care in the community, and we were very fortunate to have Highland Radio come and broadcast their programme from here not so very long ago. And Donegal was always a very important part of the hospice philosophy when my father was developing the whole hospice movement. There was never that border in existence. Cancer reaches out to everybody, no matter what age, race, sex a person is. I've grown up with the hospice since I was, as they say in Derry, knee high to a grasshopper. You know, so from a very, very early age, we knew about the hospice in the family and at home. And we were instrumental as well in being involved in counting the 2p's and the 1p's that he would bring into the house. And they had no fancy machines in those days to do the counting. You know, we did it by hand on the kitchen floor or on the living room floor. So the whole ethos of the hospice has been in our family, you know, for over 25 years, and we have grown up with it, and we know exactly what it means to him. I got involved in doing the marathons, and we did the London Marathon together, and we raised you know, an awful lot of money from that. But I suppose that deep down in all of this, it's about making sure that his dream continues, you know, to be reality and be reality for many more years.
It's important just to maintain the standards that have been set already. I mean, what has been developed already is incredible, and it's very well thought of amongst the community here and within Northern Ireland and further afield. We'd like to do here as a team is develop further the multidisciplinary team within the hospice. That would mean having our own social worker, our own physiotherapist here on the staff. At the minute we rely on outside the local community social workers and physios, but I think if we had someone here dedicated to our own multidisciplinary team, I would just create a better service for our inpatients and our outpatients as well, and for daycare patients. So they would be the kind of the developer multidisciplinary team. And also Tom was our consultant in palliative care here in the hospice. Myself, I'm a GP by training, and I've been involved with palliative care, and I've been and had experience in it now for the past 8 years. But what we'd like to do is appoint another consultant, probably jointly between ourselves and the local trust. So that will enhance services for people with palliative care needs throughout the whole trust area.
I started in the Foyle Hospice in October 1991 when the hospice opened. I was one of the first members of staff. I mean, there are 3 nursing teams within the hospice. There's the nurses in the inpatient unit, which is where we are at the moment. There are also 6 specialist home care nurses who visit patients in their own home and are dealing with death and dying on a day-in, day-out basis. And then there are 4 of a nursing team up in the day therapy unit who care for patients as well, and they come in 3 days a week into the day care unit. I think the day that we as nurses in the hospice get hardened to death is the day that we should be leaving. I have to say I'm 20 years now, over 20 years working in palliative care attached to Foyle Hospice, and I would still cry with patients and families. I'm still affected by patients, whether they're young patients, middle-aged or old patients, it doesn't matter. They're all on a journey of life and death.
I never really understood, I would say, what the hospice was doing for the community and for people throughout the Northwest until my own mother fell ill in 2004 and ended up briefly as a patient here in the Foyle Hospice. It's not just the individual who is affected by a cancer diagnosis, but it was a shattering blow for my father, Johnny. It was something which sent me and my 5 brothers reeling as well, and that rippled out through my mother's family as well, her sisters and brothers, you know. And the people here are sensitive to that. The time between her diagnosis and her death was less than 3 months, you know. But the one thing that she asked for throughout that entire experience was that her dignity be maintained. And that happened. It happened in here. And I remember the morning my mother died, one of the nurses here, Sheila Dobbins, Sheila went in herself and applied my mother's makeup. And my mother looked beautiful in the coffin, you know, she really did. And I was down to Sheila, we didn't ask her to do it, she did it, you know, she volunteered to do it. And that's the kind of thing that stays with you, you know. It's that kind of personal touch, which you wouldn't get, I think, and you wouldn't expect in a hospital setting. And if I was to be honest, I didn't expect it here in the hospice either. But Sheila did it, you know, and that kind of gesture, you know, it kind of speaks volumes for the kind of work and level of care which the staff here provide, and it's something which will remain with me forever, you know, a simple thing, but it meant so much, you know.
Was diagnosed and she was diagnosed 3 years previous with breast cancer. We said that we would stay at home all the time, and Jackie just loved being at home. She loved her home and her children, and she just felt safe and secure there. We did that for 8 weeks, and it was the problems that were reoccurring were the panic attacks in the middle of the night. That was the frightening time. And night times are very, very frightening because you don't know if there's going to come a point in the middle of the night where it's all going to go kind of wrong, and you're given this medication, and you know, if you're a carer, for want of a better word, you know to a certain extent, but after that you don't know. You're only making it up as you go along, and you're only remembering what some of the daycare nurses have told you. We just sat in the settee all night. You waited for the morning to come, and there was lovely lady, Rose Green, and she has been doing this for a while because she just knew how to handle us, for want of a better word. She says, after all the problems that she's been listening very intently, and she says, you wouldn't mind, do you think you should go to the hospice for a wee bit of respite? And at that stage, I think it was, we just loved hearing it, because we says, okay. And she went away and she says, I'll see if I get your room. So we were kind of phoning, she said, any word in that room? But the nurses here have just, I don't know what it is, but they can just disarm you from all that fear and all that anxiety. You just relax, and you're not rigid anymore, and you just sit down and you're chatting normally, you're chatting ordinary, you're telling jokes, and they're having a bit of a laugh at you. So for us, we were just disarmed right away, and then we started just to love here.
Kind of find as a family, we find it somewhere we go and bring back memories, chat, and we got to know everyone there, got to know Tom, the bishop, the nurses. So even now, the nurses nearly became, I wouldn't say friends more than anything. A lot of people in their head think of hospice, I hope I never go there, I hope I never have to experience it. And I thought that before my mum became sick. But looking back, I suppose it's somewhere where maybe you don't see family as much in everyday life, but when something like that comes to your family, you're relying on your family. So it was somewhere where we didn't have to arrange to meet, but you never went down to see your mum and there wasn't someone there, and there might have been someone there who you haven't seen in a few months. It was just great. They nearly bombed everybody, and just it was strange how I realised that I became a lot closer with my family, especially me and my dad. Just a normal father-son before it happened, but now it's with my mum. My mum was my best friend, so really I would always have chatted to her, maybe not really chatted to my dad as much as I should have. But now when it's your only option, it's just somewhere where we all became closer, became better friends. You don't really know each other as well as you should until you need to bond and chat things over. So for me, the hospice was somewhere that I could just go relax and have a bit of crack. With my mum as well, she definitely enjoyed it.
The hospice doesn't restrict you. It doesn't mean to say when you go in there that you can't come out. The hospice is about treating your condition, and they do it very, very well. But you know, there's a lot of time when you can kind of get outside or jump in a wheelchair or get into the car and go and have your dinner somewhere. We love to go out walking, so I had pushed the wheelchair everywhere around the hospice. And then Jackie wanted to come up to this field, so I had to push her up the field to read kind of plaques and look at the trees and all that kind of stuff. So I thought it would be a nice idea to have a path. So we come up with this idea, and I came down and drew it out one day, and the rest is what you see. But it was inspired by Jackie. I would say that my connection with the hospice is as strong now as it was then. Here's where I would feel closest to Jackie. Whilst we loved being at home, this was a very intense place for us, and we felt very, very close. Everyone here knows that I like to come here, and I feel closest to Jackie here.
I hope this has given you some insight into the life of this amazing place. I, like many others whose loved ones have passed away here, owe an enormous debt of gratitude to Dr. McGinley and his staff for the wonderful care that they have provided. I think the hospice is somewhere that we will always have a very strong connection with. For me, the hospice is somewhere I can always come back to. It's like a home from home.
I suppose what we're finding is people are living longer. They are palliative care in a way has been developed for people with cancer, but more and more the techniques that have been used are being used for non-malignant conditions such as Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, motor neuron disease, neurological thing, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, heart failure, and dementia. So all these things, all these other illnesses are going to become more onto the, I suppose, the wing of palliative care as well, where palliative care will feed in with the doctors and health professionals who are looking after these patients, but where we can sort of tie in with them and use the ethos and the experience that we have and the techniques that we have learned can be used throughout all these conditions. So I think that's really the way things will go in the future.
It's been an amazing journey, really. I've made so many friends, met so many people, learned so much about life and about what life is all about and about what a journey it is, and that we're all on this journey and have to accept that. And it's been a great privilege, really, to work here.
People are aware of what the hospice is about. It is about symptom management, it is about quality of life, and it is about getting patients in, getting their symptoms controlled and getting them back out into their own homes again with their own family.
Well, he has proved that he isn't so crazy after all. Thank you, Tom. I cannot believe what a fortunate woman I am to have such a remarkable and compassionate husband. God is surely on my side too, with all my love forever. David.
Were you giving them £100 or you're giving them £50,000? It's no way odds. This matters a lot to them because, I mean, this town needs a hospice and they wouldn't have a hospice without Dr. McGinley. And a lot of people don't see the amount of work that he actually does behind the scenes. And I mean, he would be one of my big ambassadors in the town.
He's the kind of man who would knock on any door, I think, to deliver this project. I think he's the kind of man who probably would have kicked down almost any door to deliver this project. He was so determined to make it happen.
Ladies and gentlemen, Tom McGinley.
I'm very proud of what he has done, and maybe biased in my pride, but you know, at the end of the day, I have grown up and seen the hard work that he has put in. I've seen the ups and I've seen the downs of this whole hospice development, and I suppose from my perspective now, I hope that for many more years to come I will be able to help in some way, just like he was able to help in some way in setting the whole ethos of the hospice up, that I will now be able to help in some way in continuing to raise money that, you know, at the end of the day will help our patients and their families.
His insight, his hard work, his connections with the people. And it's hard to believe, like, I mean, he wasn't everybody's popular choice. My father threw him out of our house a number of years ago. My father said he was nothing but an upstart from West Donegal. And he is an upstart from West Donegal, but he was very, very good for the work of the Foyle Hospice, and had it not been for him, I have to say that the work that I have done over the last 20 years, I certainly would not have done. He's a remarkable individual, and I think the city would be at a loss had it not been for him.
See, the whole thing is about Martin McCrossan is he's only an upstart too, because I think he was a blue one as well. So once he offered me to have a boxing match, maybe that'll be my next challenge. Come on, Martin.
Our motto from the start has been, together we care. And there's a plaque in the hospice that illustrates that. Together we care. But the other bit that's missing, and I'm now telling you what it was, and that was, whenever I spoke in Irish, I always finished my presentation by saying, "It's Féidir Linn." Thank you.
Like a child who's trusting eyes.
See, I'm a West Donegalan, and we're very proud, confident people, and you know, failure doesn't enter into it at all, you know. But no, I feel very privileged that the hospice has, you know, has worked so well, and I'm sure it will continue to do so, because now it's very much part of what Derry people talk about the care, the support, and that will continue.
In loving arms so fair and warm, greater love of friendship shown, in loving arms so fair and warm. In sacrifice your time is known, in loving arms so fair and warm. The morning sun, the evening fall, in loving arms so fair and warm. No task so big or task so small, in loving arms so fair and warm. Like a child whose trusting eyes, with loving hope and open arms, knowing that you're always by my side. Like a child whose trusting eyes, with loving hope and open arms, reaching out, I know you'll take my hand. The greater love of friendship shown, in loving arms so fair and warm. In sacrifice your time is known, in loving arms so fair and warm. Like a child whose trusting eyes, with loving hope and open arms, knowing that you're always by my side. Like a child whose trusting eyes, with loving hope and open arms, reaching out, I know you'll take my hand. No greater love of friendship shown, in loving arms so fair and warm.